been working on a few commission pieces this week, so I haven't had all that much time to film any projects for the website as such, but I do want to take a quick minute today and show you a cool technique that I've been using, well, all week really, to retain as much thickness and width in wider boards when they're affected by cupping and minor twist. So it's pretty common that wider boards like this will cup. So you might get it home from the hardwood dealer or the lumber yard and it's going to be nice and flat and square, but that's just the way it's been dried. I mean, generally boards will be dried in a kiln which has tons of weight on top of it, so it can't really move around all that much. But say that you get it home, you put it on your timber rack, your lumber rack, and you wait a few months until the perfect project comes up. When you eventually pull that back off your rack, you're going to notice that it's going to be cupped and twisted and bowed a little bit. Now, planks that are taken from the pith of the tree, closer to the pith of the tree I should say, are more susceptible to this. So you'll find like a board like this, which is pretty much right on the pith, it's going to cup to, well, a really bad degree. And then when you get to the outer layers of the tree, so that the closer to the bark of the tree, it becomes a little bit more stable, but still you're going to get cupping no matter which board it comes from, unless it's quarter sawn. It's always going to have that little bit of unstableness to it, because that's a word. Now, if I went ahead and milled this piece of wood here, so I've got this piece of carry which I took out of, well, it was from close to the center of the tree. So the pith would have been, where would have it been? It would have been just above this board here, so one plank above. And as you can see, if you look at the end of it, it's got quite a bit of cupping to it, and there's actually a lot of twist. So hopefully this demonstration will still work okay, but we've got a lot of twist in this board, as you can see. Now, if we wanted to mill this board as it currently stands, so we want it to be at the same width here, what we'd have to do is we'd have to take off these two low spots or high spots, depending on which way you look at it, to be level with this lowest part of the cup. So really what we have to do is remove all of that material that I've covered with the tape. Now on top of that, we've got to bring the opposing face to be nice and parallel. So we've got to remove the high spot to this low spot here, and it has to be parallel though. So we've practically removed all of that material. In fact, that bit has to be even lower. So essentially what we've actually done, we've turned our 40mm thick board into a 20mm thick board, and that's before we've removed any twist as well. So by the time this board, which has a lot of twist in it, is done, it is actually going to be useful for nothing but matchsticks. So how do we actually keep a board like this as thick as possible? Well, it's actually pretty simple, and the answer is just don't mill it. At least don't mill it until you need to. So say that your project you're working on calls for several components to come out of this one board. So you've got maybe a couple of legs that you need to cut out of it, or a couple of rails. What you want to do is you want to lay it out roughly on top of your rough sawn board, so before any milling has happened, and cut those components out. So say that you've got 3 legs and they're coming from the width of this board. By cutting this board in 3, you're actually reducing that cupping by, well, pretty much to 0, because think about it, the cupping is across the width of the board. If you cut that in thirds, that cupping is reduced every time it's cut. So the severity of that cupping is pretty much gone. So when you're milling it, all you've really got to contend with is maybe a little bit of bowing, maybe a little bit of twist, depending on how bad your board is warped. Now, how do we keep as much width to this board as well as much thickness? Well, the answer is a little bit counterintuitive, but trust me, it does work. Now then, to keep this board as wide as possible, we actually want to cut it in half. Now, I know it's counterintuitive, but when we cut it in half, what we're doing is we're pretty much reducing the amount of cupping across the width of each half. So when we remove the material, instead of removing like 7mm before it's flat, we only have to remove about 2 or 3. When I'm working in rough stock, the best tool that you can ever get is a string line or a chalk line. So I'll just actually get the string on the highest point of the cup. So with the cup facing down, I'll put it on the highest point, because that's when our board's at its most stable point. And I'll run that across the width, and I'll run that across the width of the board. And I'll just ping that line. And then with a board like this, so something that's fairly short, easy to manage, I'd rip this in half at my bandsaw. I wouldn't use my table saw because of the amount of twist in it, it's just not going to be stable. So if it was any bigger than that, I'd actually either go to a jigsaw or maybe possibly a circular saw. So now with that board cut in half, you can see that these two halves of this board, the cupping is actually reduced to, well, it's very little. So on this side here, we've maybe got 1 millimeter to remove to the low spot here. And on this side here, it's actually pretty much dead straight. Now, so we'll take both boards over to the jointer and we'll make one face flat on each side, on each piece I should say. And then we'll also make the edges we just ripped at the bandsaw to be perfectly 90 degrees to that face. And then we'll send both pieces through the thicknesser to bring the opposing faces to be nice and parallel. So now we have these two boards which are perfectly flat, free of twist. There's no cupping, no bowing to them whatsoever. They're just dead flat. When we actually join them together like this, you'll see that you can barely even see a seam. Now, obviously if you've used something with a really big kerf, you might have a slight gap in there, but when you use a bandsaw or something like that, these two faces match up perfectly. And even on the end grain, you wouldn't be able to tell these were made up of two boards once they're glued back together. Okay, so as you can see, by using this method, we've managed to retain quite a bit of thickness in this board, especially considering that it did have twist in it. So what the measurement I have here is actually it's practically 30 millimeters of thickness. So all in all, this board was 37 millimeters thick at the beginning with all that twist and bowing in it. And now that all of the twist and bow is removed, it's still 30 millimeters thick, which is pretty impressive considering the severity of the amount of bow and twist in it. Now remember that Jords Woodshop is a weekly woodworking podcast, so make sure you do click that subscribe button down there if you haven't already, because we put new videos out every week. Now throughout the month of December and going into early weeks of January, I am holding a fundraiser if you weren't aware. So the idea behind the fundraiser is to gain better audio equipment so you don't constantly hear this background noise and things like shuffling of clothing and all that sort of stuff. So head over to my website, JordsWoodShop.com. You'll see a banner up there, so just click on that and it will show you all the details of the fundraiser, and there's going to be prizes and things at the end of it too. Now one last thing, I'm also on Facebook, so head over to facebook.com/JordsWoodShop and give my Facebook page a like over there, because you'll get a lot of photos and things from behind the scenes, and you'll stay up to date with current projects, what's coming, what's not coming, and all that sort of stuff. So once again, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and yeah, subscribe.